Now, let's see the another chapter, that is chapter number 22. Rescues from serpent bites. First, Bala Sahib Mirikar. Second, Bapu Sahib Bhuti. Third, Amir Shakkar. Fourth, Himad Pant. Baba's opinion regarding killing of serpents. Preliminary. How to meditate on Baba? No one has been able to fathom the nature or the form of Almighty. Even the Vedas and the thousand-tongued Shesha are not able to describe it fully. The devotees also cannot know but only look at the form of the Lord, for they know that His feet are their only refuge. They know no other method of attaining the supreme goal of life except meditating on the holy feet. Hemadpan suggests an easy way of devotion and meditation as follows. As the dark fortnight of every month wears out gradually, the moonlight also wanes in the same degree, and on the new moon day, we do not see the moon at all. Therefore, when the bright fortnight begins, people are very anxious to see the moon. On the first day, the moon is not seen, and on the second day, she emerges as a thin crescent. Then the people are asked to see the moon through the opening between the two branches of tree, and when they begin to see through this aperture eagerly, the distant small crescents of the moon come to their sight. Following these instances, let us see Baba's form. Look at Baba's posture. How fine it is. He is sitting with the legs folded, the right leg held across the left knee. The fingers on his left hand are spread on the right foot. On the toe are spread his two fingers, the index and middle ones. By this posture, Baba seems to say, if you want to see my true form, be egoless and most humble and meditate on my toe through the opening between index and middle fingers, and then you will be able to see my light. Now let us turn to Baba's life. Shirdi had become a place of pilgrimage on account of Baba's stay there. People from all quarters began to flock there, and both the rich and the poor began to be benefited in more ways than one. Who can describe Baba's boundless love and his wonderful knowledge and his all pervasiveness? Blessed is he who could experience this. Sometimes Baba observed long silence, which was in a way his dissertation on Brahma. At other times he was a pure consciousness, bliss incarnate surrounded by his devotees. Sometimes he spoke in parables, and at other times indulged in wit and humor. At times he was quite calm, at that times he seemed enraged. Sometimes he gave his teachings in a nutshell, at other times he argued at length. Many a times he was very direct. In this way he gave varied instructions to many according to their requirements. His life was therefore inscrutable beyond the ken of our mind, intellect and speech. Our longing to see his face, to talk with him and hear his leelas was never satisfied, still we were overflowing the joy. We can gauge the showers of rain, capture the wind in the leather bag, but who can measure this leela? Now we deal here with one aspect of them, that is, how he anticipated or forestalled the calamities of these devotees and warned them in time. So, now let us see the first story of this chapter, that is of Bala Sahib Mirikar. Bala Sahib Mirikar, son of Sardar Kaka Sahib Mirikar, was Mamlatdar of Kopargaon. He was going on tour to Chitali. On the way he came to Shirdi to see Sai Baba. When he went to the masjid and prostrated himself before Baba, the usual conversation regarding health and other matters commenced when Baba sounded a note of warning. Do you know our Dwarka Mai? As Bala Sahib did not understand, he kept quiet. Baba continued. This is our Dwarka Mai where you are sitting. She wards off all dangers and anxieties of the children who sit in her lap. This Masjid Mai, that is presiding deity, is very merciful. She is the merciful mother of the simple devotees whom she will save in calamities. Once a person sits on her lap, all his troubles are over. He who rests in her shade gets bliss. Then Baba gave him Udi and placed his hand on his head. When Bala Sahib was about to depart, he again said, Do you know the Lamba Baba? That is long gentleman. That is serpent, म्हणजे साप. And then closing the left fist, he brought it under the right elbow and moving his left arm like the hood of the serpent, said, "He is so terrible, but what can he do to the children of Dwarkamai? When the Dwarkamai protects, what can the serpent do?" All who were present there were curious to know the meaning of all this sound and this reference to miracle, but none had the courage to ask Baba about this. Then Balasaheb saluted Baba and left the masjid with Shama. Baba called Shama back and asked him to accompany Balasaheb and enjoyed the Chitali trip. Shama came to Balasaheb and told him that he would go with him according to Baba's wish. Baba Sahib replied that he need not come as he could be inconvenient. Shama returned to Baba and told him what Bala Sahib said to him. Baba said, "All right, do not go. We shall mean well and do well. Whatever is destined to happen will happen." In the meanwhile, Bala Sahib thought it over again and calling Shama, asked him to accompany him. Then Shama went again to Baba and after taking his leave started with Bala Sahib in the Tanga. They reached Chitali at 9 p.m. and encamped in the Maruti temple. The office people had not come, so they sat in the temple talking and chit-chatting. Bala Sahib was sitting on a mat reading a newspaper. His uparni, that is upper dhotar, was spread across his waist and on it a snake was sitting unnoticed. It began to move with a hissing sound, which was heard by the peon. He brought a lantern, saw the snake and raised an alarm. "Serpent! Serpent!" Bala Sahib was frightened and began to quiver. Shama was also stunned. Then he and others moved quietly and took stick and clubs in their hand. The snake slowly came down the waist and moved away from Bala Sahib and it was immediately done to death. Thus this calamity which was prophesied by Baba was averted and Bala Sahib's devotion in Baba was confirmed. Now let's see the next story, that is of Bapu Sahib Bhutti. A great astrologer named Nana Sahib Dengre told Bapu Sahib Bhutti, who was then in Shirdi, "Today is an auspicious day for you. There is a danger to your life." This made Bapu Sahib restless. When they as usual came to masjid, Baba said to Bapu Sahib, "What does this Nana say? He foretells death for you? Well, you need not to be afraid. Tell him, let us see how death kills." Then, later in the evening, Bapu Sahib went to his privy for easing himself, where he saw a snake. His servant saw it and lifted a stone to strike at it. Bapu Sahib asked him to get a big stick, but before the servant returned with the stick, the snake was seen moving away and soon disappeared. Bapu Sahib remembered Baba's words of fearlessness. Next story is of Amir Shakkar. Amir Shakkar was a native of the village Korale in Kopargaon Taluka. He belonged to the Bachcher caste. He worked as a commission agent in Bandra and was well known there. He once suffered from rheumatism which gave him much pain. He then remembered Allah, that is God, left his business and went to Shirdi and prayed to Baba to relieve him from his malady. Baba then straightened him in the Chaudi. The Chaudi was then a damp, unhealthy place unfit for such a patient. Any other place in the village of Korale itself would have been better for Amir, but Baba's words was the command to chief medicine. Baba did not allow him to come to the masjid but fixed him in the Chaudi. Every morning and evening, every alternate day, Baba went to the Chaudi in a procession and slept there. So Amir got Baba's contact very often. Amir stayed there for full 9 months and then he got a disgust for the place. So one night, he stealthily left the place and came to Kopargaon and stayed in the Dharmashala. There he saw an old dying fakir who asked him for water. Amir brought it and gave it to him. As soon as he drank it, he passed away. Now Amir was in a fix. He thought that if he went and informed the authorities, he would be held responsible for the death, and he was the first and sole informant and knew something about it. He repented for his action, that is, leaving Shirdi without Baba's permission, and prayed to Baba. He then determined to return to Shirdi, and same night he retreated, remembering and muttering Baba's name all the way, and reached Shirdi before daybreak and became free from anxiety. Then he lived in the Chaudi in perfect accordance with Baba's wishes and orders and got himself cured. One night, it so happened that Baba cried at midnight, "Oh, Abdul, some devilish creature is dashing against the side of my bed." Abdul came with the lantern, examined Baba's bed, but found nothing. Baba asked him to examine carefully all the place and began to strike the ground with his satka. Seeing this Leela of Baba, Amir thought that Baba might have suspected some serpent there. Amir could know by close contact with Baba the meaning of his words and actions. Baba then saw near Amir's cushion something moving. He asked Abdul to bring in the light, and when he brought it, he saw the serpent coiled up there, moving his head up and down. Thereupon, the serpent was immediately bitten to death. Thus, Baba gave timely warning and saved Amir's life. Wow, wonderful are the Leelas of Baba. Now, let's see the last second story of this chapter, that is Hemad Panth, Scorpion and Serpent. First, at Baba's recommendation, Kaka Sahib Dikshit was daily reading the two works of Sri Eknath Maharaj, that is Bhagavad and Bhavaratha Ramayana, and Hemad Panth had the good fortune to be one of the audience when the reading of the work was going on. Once, when a portion from the Ramayana relating to Hanuman's testing Rama's greatness according to his mother's instruction was being read, all the listeners were spellbound. Hemad Panth was one of them. A big scorpion, that is, none knew where it came from, jumped and sat on the right shoulder of Hemad Panth on his uparni, that is, upper dhotar. First he was not noticed, but as the Lord protects those who are intent on hearing his stories, he casually cast a glance over his right shoulder and noticed it. It was dead silence, not a bit moving here or there. It seemed as if it also enjoyed the reading. Then, by the Lord's grace, Hemad Panth, without disturbing the audience, took the two ends of his dhotar, folded them, and brought them together, enclosing the scorpion within. Then he went out and threw it in the garden. Second, on another occasion, some persons were sitting in the upper floor of Kaka Sahib's Wada just before nightfall when a serpent crept through a hole in the window frame and sat coiled up. A light was brought. Though it was first dazzled, yet it sat still and moved his head up and down. Then many persons rushed there with stick and cudgels, but as it sat in an awkward place, no blow could be dealt. But hearing the noises of men, the serpent went out hastily through the same hole. Then all the persons present there left relieved. And now let's see the Baba's opinion. That is last point of this chapter. One devotee named Muktaram then said that was good that the poor creature escaped. Hemad Panth challenged him, saying that serpents should better be killed. There was a hot discussion between them. The former contending that serpent and such creatures should not be killed, the latter they should be. As night came on, the discussion came to an end without any decision being arrived at. Next day, the question was referred to Baba, who gave his settled opinions as follows. God lives in all beings and creatures, whether they be serpents or scorpions. He is the great wire puller of the world, and all beings, serpents, scorpions, etc. obey his command. Unless he wills it, nobody can do any harm to others. The world is all dependent on him, and no one is independent. So we should take a pity and love all creatures, leave off killings and be patient. The Lord, that is God, is protector of all. This is the great message that we all have learned from this last point. And by this way we have ended up with this chapter. Both to Sri Sai and peace to be all. Let's move on to chapter number 23. That is Yoga and Onion. First point, Shama cured of snake bite. Second, cholera ordinance broken. And third, ordeal of Guru Bhakti. So let's see the preliminary. In reality, this jiva, that is the human soul, transcends the three qualities, that is sattva, rajas, tamas, which we seen in the first chapter. But being deluded by Maya, he forgets his nature, which is pure consciousness, knowledge, bliss, and thinks that he is the deer and thus entangles himself in endless miseries and does not know the way of deliverance. The only way of deliverance is the loving devotion towards the Guru's feet. The great player or actor, Lord Sai, has delighted his bhaktas and transformed them into himself, that is, his nature. We regard Sai Baba as an incarnation of God for reasons already stated, but he always said that he was an obedient servant of God. Though an incarnation, he showed people the way to behave satisfactorily and to carry out the duties of their respective stations, that is, varnas in the life. He never emulated others in any way nor asked others to have something done for him. For him who saw the God in all movable and immovable things of this world, humility was the virtue. None he disregarded or disrespected, for he saw Narayan, that is Lord, in all beings. He never said, I am God, but that he was a humble servant, and he always remembered him and always uttered Allah Malik. God is the sole proprietor or owner. We do not know the various kinds of saints, how they behave, what they do, etc. We only know that by God's grace, they manifest themselves in this world to liberate the ignorant and bound souls. If there be any store of merits in our account, we get a desire or interest in listening to the stories and leelas of the saints, otherwise not. Let us now turn to the main stories of this chapter, that is yoga and onion. Once it so happened that a sadhak of yoga came to Shirdi with Nanasaheb Chandorkar. He had studied all the works on yoga, including the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, but had no practical experience. He could not concentrate his mind and attain samadhi even for a short time. He thought that if Sai Baba will be pleased with him, he will show him the way to attain samadhi for a longer time. With this object in view, he came to Shirdi, and when he went to masjid, he saw Sai Baba eating chapati with onion. On seeing this, a thought crossed his mind. How can this man eating stale bread with raw onions solve my difficulties and help me? Sai Baba read his mind and said to Nana Sahib, "Oh Nana, he who has the power to digest onion should eat it and none else." Hearing this remark, the yogi was wonderstruck and he fell at Baba's feet with complete surrender. With pure and open mind, he asked his difficulties and got their solution from Baba. Thus, being satisfied and happy, he left Shirdi with Baba's Udi and blessings. And now, let us see the second story of this chapter, that is Shama cured of snake bite. Before Hemadpan begins the story, he says about the jiva that it can be very well compared with a parrot and that they both are bound, the one in the body and the other in a cage. Both think that their present bound state is good for them. It is only when a helper, that is Guru, comes and by God's grace opens their eyes and liberates them from their bondage that their eyes are open to a greater and larger life, compared to which their former bound and limited life is nothing. In the last chapter, it was shown how Baba anticipated the calamity and was to befall on Mr. Mirikar and rescued him from it. Now let the readers hear a story more interesting than this. Once Shama was bitten by a poisonous snake. His little finger was bitten and the poison began to spread in the body. The pain was also severe and the Shama thought that he would pass away soon. His friend wanted to take him to God Vithoba, where such cases are often sent, but Shama ran to the masjid to his Vithoba, that is Sai Baba. When Baba saw him, he began to scold and abuse. He got enraged and said, "Oh, vile Baturda, that is priest, do not climb up. Beware if you do so." And then roared, "Go, get away, come down." Seeing Baba's thus red with warmth, Shama was greatly puzzled and disappointed. He thought that the masjid was his home and Sai Baba his sole refuge. But if he was driven away like this, where should he go? He lost all hopes of life and kept silent. After a while, When Baba became normal and calm, Shama went up and sat near him. Then Baba said to him, "Don't be afraid. Don't care a jot, that is a small amount. The merciful fakir will save you. Go and sit quiet at home. Don't go out. Believe in me and remain fearless and have no anxiety." Then he was sent home. Immediately afterwards, Baba sent Tata Patil and Kaka Sahib Dikshit to him with instructions to the effect that he should eat what he liked, should move around in the house, but should in no case lie down and sleep. Needless to say that these instructions were acted upon. Shama got all right in short time. The only thing to be remembered in this connection is this: the words of Baba, that is, or the 5-symboled mantra, that is, "Go, get away, come down," were not addressed to Shama as it apparently looked, but they were direct order to the snake and its poison not to rise up and circulate through Shama's body. Like others well versed in Mantra Shastra, he had not to use any incantation, charged rice or water, etc. His words only were most efficacious in saving the life of Shama. Anyone hearing this story and other similar ones will beget firm faith in the feet of Sai Baba, and the only way to cross the ocean of Maya is to remember the feet of Baba in the heart. Wow, wonderful are the Leelas of Baba. Now let's see the next Leela, that is cholera epidemic. Once cholera was raging virulently in Shirdi. The residents were much frightened and they stopped all communication with the outside people. Sarpanch of the village assembled together and decided upon 2 ordinances as a remedy to check and put down the epidemic. They were: first, no fuel cart should be allowed to come in the village, and second, no goat should be killed there. If anybody disobeyed these ordinances, they were to be fined by the village authorities and the Sarpanch. Baba knew that all this was mere superstition, and therefore he cared a damned for the cholera ordinances. While the ordinances were in force, a fuel cart came there and wanted to enter the village. Everybody knew that there was dearth or scarcity of fuel in the village. Still, people began to drive away the fuel cart. Baba came to know of this. He came to spot and asked the cartman to take the fuel cart to the masjid. None dared to raise his voice against this action of Baba. He wanted fuel for his dhuni, and so he purchased it. Like an Agnihotri keeping his sacred fire alive throughout his life, Baba kept this dhuni ever burning all day and night, and for this he always stocked the fuel. Baba's home, that is, the masjid, was free and open to all. It had no lock and key, and some poor people removed some wood from there for their use. Baba did not grumble about this. Baba saw that the whole universe was provided by the Almighty, and so he never bore enmity or ill will to anybody. Though perfectly detached, he behaved like an ordinary householder to set an example to the people. And now, last point of this chapter is ordeal of Guru Bhakti. Let us now see how the second cholera ordinance fared with Baba. While it was in force, somebody brought a goat to the masjid. It was weak, old, and about to die. At this time, Fakir Pir Muhammad of Malegaon, alias म्हणजेच उर्फ Bade Baba, was near. Sai Baba asked him to behead it with one stroke and offer it an oblation. This Bade Baba was much respected by Sai Baba. He always sat on the right side of Sai Baba. After the chilim was first smoked by him, it was then offered to Baba and others. After the dishes were served, at the time of taking meals at noon, Baba called Bade Baba and made him sit on his left side, and then all partook of food. Baba paid him also daily ₹50 out of the amount collected as dakshina. Baba accompanied him 100 steps whenever he went away from the masjid. Such was his position with Baba. But when Baba asked him to behead the goat, he flatly refused, saying, "Why it should be killed for nothing?" Then Baba asked Shama to kill it. He went to Radha Krishna and brought a knife from her and placed it before Baba. Knowing the purpose for which the knife was taken, she recalled it. Then Shama went to bring another knife but stayed in the Vada and did not return soon. Then came the turn of Kaka Sahib Dikshit. He was gold, not doubt but had to be tested. Baba asked him to get a knife and kill the goat. He went to Sathe's Vada and returned with a knife. He was ready to kill it at Baba's bidding. He was born in a pure Brahmin family and never in his life knew killing. Though quite averse to do any act of violence, still he made himself bold to kill the goat. All the people wondered to see that while Bade Baba, a Mohammedan, was unwilling to kill it, but this Brahmin was making preparations to do so. He tightened his dhotar and with a semicircular motion raised his hand with the knife and looked at Baba for the final signal. Baba said, "What are you thinking of? Go on, strike." Then when the hand was just about to come down, Baba said, "Stop! How cruel you are! Being a Brahman, you are killing a goat." Kaka Sahib obeyed and kept the knife down and said to Baba, "Your word is law unto us. We do not know any other ordinance. We remember you always, meditate on your form and obey you day and night. We do not know or consider whether it is right or wrong to kill. We do not want to reason or discuss things, but implicit and prompt compliance with Guru's orders. It is our duty and dharma." Then Baba said to Kaka Sahib that he would himself do the offerings and killing business. It was settled that the goat should be disposed of near a place called Takia where fakirs used to sit. Then when the goat was being taken to that place, it fell dead on the way. Hemadpan closes the chapter with the classification of disciples. He says that they are of three kinds. First or best. Second or average. And third or ordinary. The best kind of disciples are those who guess what their gurus want and immediately carry it out and serve them without waiting for an order from them. The average disciples are those who carry out the orders of their masters to a letter without any delay, and the third kind of disciple are those who go on postponing the carrying out of their order and make mistakes at every step. These disciples should have firm faith backed up by intelligence, and if they add patience to this, their spiritual goal will not be distant. Control of breath, ingoing and outgoing, or hatha yoga or other difficult practices are not at all necessary. When the disciples get the above mentioned qualities, they become ready for further instructions, and the masters then appear and lead them on in their spiritual path to perfection. In the next chapter, we deal with Baba's interesting wit and humor. And by this way, we have ended with this chapter. Both to Sri Sai and peace to be all. And now, here is chapter number 24. In this chapter, we are going to see Baba's wit and humor, that is Chana Leela of first Hemad Pant, second Sudama, third Anna Chinchanikar versus Maushibai. Preliminary. Unless we surrender our ego to the feet of our Sadguru, we will not succeed in our undertaking. If we become egoless, then our success is assured. By worshipping Sai Baba, we attain both the objects, worldly and spiritual, and are fixed in our true nature and get peace and happiness. Therefore, those who want to accomplish or gain their welfare should respectfully hear Sai Baba's Leelas or story and meditate on them. If they do this, they will easily attain the object of their life and get bliss. Generally, all people like wit and humor, but they do not like that jokes should be cut at their expense. But Baba's method was peculiar. When it was accompanied with good gestures, it was a very interesting and instructive, and the people therefore did not mind even if they were helped up to the ridicule. Hemadpan gives his own instance below. Now let's see the first story, that is Chana Leela. In Shirdi, a special bazaar was held every Sunday, and people from the neighboring villages came there, erected booths and stalls in the open street and sold their wares and commodities. Every noon the masjid was crowded, but on Sunday it was crowded in suffocation. On one such Sunday, Hemadpant sat in front of Baba, shampooing his legs and muttering God's name. Shama was on Baba's feet, Vaman Rao to his right. Shriman Bhutti and Kakasaheb Dikshit and others were also present there. Then Shama laughed and said to Anna Sahib, "See that some grains seem to have stuck to the sleeves of your coat." So saying, he touched the sleeves and found that there were some grains. Hemadpant straightened his left forearm to see what the matter was, and to the surprise of all, some grains of gram came rolling down and were picked up by the people who were sitting there. This incident furnished a subject matter for joke. Everybody present began to wonder and said something or other as to how the grains found their way into the sleeves of the coat and lodged there so long. Hemadpant also could not guess. When nobody could give any satisfactory explanation in this matter and everybody was wondering about this mystery, Baba said as follows: "This fellow, Anna Sahib, has got the bad habit to eating alone. Today is a bazaar day and he came here chewing grams. I know his habit and his grams are a proof of it. That wonder is there in this matter." Hemadpant: "Baba, I never know of eating things alone. Then why do you shoulder this bad habit on me? I have never yet seen Shirdi Bazaar. I never went to the bazaar today. Then how could I buy grams and how could I eat them if I had no bought them? I never eat anything unless I share it with other present around me at time of my meals." Baba says, "It's true that you give to the person present, but if none be nearby, what could you do or I do? But do you remember me before eating? Am I not always with you? Then do you offer me anything before you eat?" So the moral of this Chana Leela is, let us mark and note carefully what Baba has taught us by this incident. He has advised us that before the senses, mind and intellect enjoy their objects, first he should be remembered, and if this is be done, it is in a way by making an offering to him. The senses, etc., can never remain without their object, but if those objects are first offered to the Guru, the attachment for them will naturally vanish. In this way, all the vrittis, that is, subtle thoughts regarding desire, anger, avarice, etc., should first be offered and directed to the Guru, and if it is practiced, be followed, the Lord will help you in eradicating all the vrittis. When before enjoyment of the objects you think that Baba is present, the question whether the object is fit to be enjoyed or not will at once arise. Then the object that is not fit to be enjoyed will be shunned, and in this way our vicious habits or vices will disappear and our character will improve. Then love for the Guru will grow and pure knowledge will sprout up. When this knowledge grows, the bondage of body consciousness, that is, we are the body, will snap and our intellect will be merged in spirit consciousness. Then we shall get bliss and contentment. There is no difference between Guru and God. He who sees any difference in them finds God nowhere. So leaving aside all ideas of difference, we should regard Guru and God as one. And if we serve our Guru as stated above, God will be certainly pleased, and by purifying our minds will give us self-realization. To put the matter in a nutshell, we should not enjoy any object with our sense, etc., without first remembering our Guru. When the mind is trained in this way, we will be always reminded of Baba, and our meditation on Baba will grow apace. The Sagun form of Baba will ever be before our eyes, and then devotion, non-attachment and salvation will all be ours. When Baba's form is thus fixed before our mental vision, we forgot hunger, thirst and this sansar, that is world. The consciousness of worldly pleasure will disappear and our mind shall attain peace and happiness. And now, let's move towards the next story, that is Sudama's story. When the above story was being narrated, Hemadpant was reminded of a similar story of Sudama which illustrates the same principle, and therefore it is given here. Sri Krishna and his elder brother Balram were living with a co-student named Sudama in the ashram of their guru Sandipani. Once Krishna and Balram were sent to the forest for bringing fuel. Then the wife of Sandipani sent Sudama also for the same purpose with some quantity of grams for the three. When Krishna met Sudama in the forest, he said to him, Dada, I want water as I am thirsty. Sudama replied, No water should be drunk on an empty stomach, so it is better to rest a while. He did not say that he had got grams with him and that Krishna should take some. As Krishna was tired, he lay down for rest on the lap of Sudama and was soon snoring. On seeing this, Sudama took out the grams and began to eat. Then Krishna suddenly asked him, Dada, what are you eating? What is this chitter-chatter sound? He replied, What is there to eat? I am shivering with cold and my teeth are chattering. I can't even repeat Vishnu Sahasranam. Hearing this, the omniscient Krishna said, I just had a dream in which I saw a man eating things of another, and when asked about this, he said, What does should he eat? Meaning thereby that he had nothing to eat. The other man said, Let it be so. Dada, this is only a dream. I know that you won't eat anything without me. Under the influence of the dream, I asked you what you were eating. If Sudama had known the omniscient Sri Krishna and his Leela, he would not have acted as he did. Therefore, he had to suffer for what he did. Though he was a chum of Krishna, he had to pass his latter life in utter poverty. But when he later offered Krishna a handful of parched rice earned by his wife with her own labor, Krishna was pleased and gave him a golden estate to enjoy. This story should be remembered by those who have a habit of eating things alone without partaking them with others. The Shruti also emphasizes this lesson and asks us to offer things first to God and then enjoy them after they are renounced by Him. Baba also has taught us the same lesson in his inimitable and humorous way. And now let's see the next interesting story, that is of Anna Chinsnikar versus Maushibai. Hemadpant now describes another witty incident in which Baba played a peacemaker's part. There was one devotee by name Damodar Ghanasham Babre, alias म्हणजेच उर्फ Anna Chinsnikar. He was simple, rustic and straightforward. He cared for nobody, always spoke plainly and carried all dealings in cash. Though he looked outwardly harsh and uncompromising, he was good-natured and guileless. So Sai Baba loved him. He has willed away all his property to Sri Sai Baba Sansthan, Shirdi. One day, like others serving Baba in their own way, this Anna was shampooing the left arm of Baba, which rested on the kathada, that is railing. On the other side, one old widow named Vinubai Kaujargi, whom Baba called mother and all other called Maushibai, was serving Baba in her own way. The Maushibai was an elderly woman of pure heart. She clasped the finger of both her hands round the trunk of Baba and was at this time massaging Baba's abdomen. She did this so forcibly that Baba's back and abdomen became flat and Baba moved from side to side. Anna on the other side was steady, but Maushibai's face moved up and down with her strokes. Once, it is so happened that her face came very close to Anna's. Being a witty disposition, she remarked, "Oh, this Anna is a lewd fellow. He wants to kiss me. Even being so old with grey hair, he feels no shame in kissing me." These words enraged Anna and he pulled up his sleeves and said, "You say that I am an old bad fellow? Am I quite a fool? It is you who has picked a quarrel with me." All the persons present there were enjoying this encounter between them. Baba, who loved both of them equally and wanted to pacify them, managed the affair very skillfully. Lovingly he said, "Oh Anna, why are you unnecessarily raising this hue and cry? I do not understand what harm or impropriety is there when the mother is kissed." Hearing this word of Baba, both of them were satisfied, and all the persons laughed merrily and enjoyed Baba's wit to their heart's content. So, by this way, this story was really with a great humor. And now let's proceed towards the next story, that is Baba's characteristics, that is, his dependency on bhaktas. Baba allowed his devotees to serve him in their own way and did not like any other person interfering in this. The quote and instances the same Maushibai was on another occasion kneading Baba's abdomen. Seeing the force used by her, all other devotees felt nervous and anxious. They said, "O mother, be more considerate and moderate, otherwise you will break Baba's arteries and nerves." At this, Baba got up at once from his seat and dashed his satka on the ground. He got enraged and his eyes became red like a live embers. None dared to stand before Baba. Then he took hold of one end of satka with both hands and pressed it in the hollow of his abdomen. The other end he fixed to the post and began to press his abdomen against it. The satka, which was about 2 or 3 feet in length, seemed all ready to go into the abdomen, and the people feared that the abdomen would be ruptured in a short time. The post was fixed and immovable, and Baba began to go closer and closer to it and clasped the post firmly. Every moment the rupture was expected, and they were all dismayed, did not know what to do, and stood dumb with wonder and fear. The other devotees wanted only to give a hint to the Maushibai to be moderate in her service and not cause any trouble or pain to Baba. They were surprised to see that their well-intentioned effort had resulted in the crisis, and they could do nothing but to wait and watch. Fortunately, Baba's rage soon cooled down. He left the satka and resumed his seat. From this time onwards, the devotees took the lesson that they should not meddle with anybody but allow him to serve Babas as he chooses, as he was capable to gauge the merits and worth of the service rendered unto him. And by this way, we have ended up with this chapter. Both to Sri Sai and peace to be all. Here is the chapter number 25. Damu Anna Kasar of Ahmednagar. First point, that is of speculations, and second of Amralila. Preliminary. We begin this chapter with a prostration with all our 8 limbs to Sai Baba, who is an ocean of mercy, the God incarnate, the Parabrahma, and the great Yogeshwara, that is Lord of Yoga. Victory be unto Sai Baba, who is the Christ jewel of the saints and abode of all auspicious things, our Atmaram, that is self, and the sole refuge of the devotees. We prostrate ourselves before him who has attained the aim and ended of life. Sai Baba is always full of mercy. What is wanted in our part is wholehearted devotion to him. When a devotee has got firm faith and devotion, his wishes are soon fulfilled. When the desire arose in a mind of Hemadpant to write the life of Leelas of Sai Baba, he immediately got it written by him. When the order to keep the memos was given, Hemadpant was inspired, and his intellect got strength and boldness to undertake and finish the work. He was not, as he says, qualified to write the work, but the gracious blessings of Baba enabled him to complete the undertaking, and thus you have this Satacharitra, which is a kistan or a somakan jewel, from which nectar in the form of Sai Leelas oozes out for the readers to drink to their heart's content. Whenever a devotee had complete a wholehearted devotion to Sai Baba, all his calamities and dangers were warded off and his welfare attended to by Baba. The story of Damodar Rasne Kasar of Ahmednagar, that is, he is now in Pune, alias Urfa Damu Anna, illustrating the above statement, is given below. Now let's see the short introduction of Damu Anna. The readers are aware that a mention of this gentleman was made in the 6th chapter regarding the celebration of Ram Navami festival in Shirdi. He went to Shirdi about the year 1895 AD, when the Ram Navami Utsav celebrating began to since that time. He had been providing an ornamental flag for that occasion every year. He also feeds the poor and the fakirs who come there for the festival. And now let's see his speculations. That is the first point of this chapter. Cotton trading. A Mumbai friend of Damu Anna wrote to him that they should do some cotton speculations business in partnership which would bring them about 2 lakh of rupees as profit. Damu Anna says in his statement made about the year 1936 to Mr. B.V. Narasimha Swamy that the proposal about speculating at Mumbai in cotton was from a broker who was not to be a partner and that he, Damu Anna, was to be the sole adventurer. The broker wrote that the business was good and involved no risks and that the opportunity should not be lost. Damu Anna was vacillating. He could not at once determine to venture into the speculations. He thought over this and as he was a devotee of Baba, he wrote a detailed letter to Shama giving all the facts and requested him to consult Baba and take his advice in the matter. Shama got the letter next day and he went with it at noon to the masjid and placed it before Baba. He asked Shama what the matter was and what the letter was about. He replied that Damu Anna of Nagar wanted to consult him about something. Then Baba said, "What does he write and what does he plan?" "It seems that he wants to reach the sky and he is not content with what God has given him. Read this letter." Shama then said, "The letter contains what you have just said. O Deva, you sit there calm and composed and agitate the devotees, and when they get restless, you draw them here, some in person and the other through letters. If you know the contents of the letter, why do you then press me to read it?" Baba said, "O Shama, read it. I speak at random, and who believes me?" Then Shama read the letter, and Baba heard it attentively and said feelingly, "The said Damu Anna had gone mad. Write to him in reply that nothing is wanting in his house. Let him be content with the half loaf he has and not bother himself about lakhs." Shama sent the reply, which Damu Anna was anxiously waiting for. After reading it, he found that all his hopes and prospects about lakh of rupees as profit were dashed to the ground. He thought that he had done a mistake by consulting Baba. But as Shama had hinted in the reply that there was always much difference in seeing and hearing and that therefore he should come to Shirdi personally and see Baba. He thought it was advisable to go to Shirdi and consult Baba personally about the affair. So he went to Shirdi, saw Baba, prostrated himself before him and sat shampooing his legs. He had no courage to ask Baba openly about the speculations, but he thought in his mind that it would be better if some share in the business should be assigned to Baba, and said in his mind that if Baba were to help him in this transaction, he would surrender some share of profits to him. Damu Anna was thus thinking secretly in his mind, but nothing was veiled from Baba. Everything past, present, and future were clear to him. A child wants sweet, but his mother gives bitter pills. The former spoil his health, while the latter improve it. So the mother, looking to the welfare of her infant, coaxes and gives bitter pills. Baba, kind mother as he was, knew the present and future prospects of his devotees, and therefore, reading Damu Anna's mind, he openly spoke to him, "Bapu, I do not want to be entangled in any such worldly things, that is sharing profits." On seeing Baba's disapproval, Damu Anna dropped the enterprise. And now second speculation is about grain dealing. Then he thought of trading in rice, wheat and other grains. Baba read these thoughts also and said to him, "You will be buying at 5 seeds and selling at 7 seeds a rupee." So this business was also given up. The rise in the prices of grain was kept up for some time and Baba's prophecies seemed to be falsified. But in a month or two there was abundant rain everywhere and the prices suddenly fell down, and therefore those who stored grains suffered a severe losses. Damu Anna was saved from this fate. Needless to say that the cotton speculation, which was conducted by the broker with the help of another merchant, also collapsed with severe loss to the adventurers. After seeing that Baba had saved him from 2 severe losses in cotton and grain speculations, Damu Anna's faith in Baba grew stronger and he remained a true devotee of Baba till his passing away. Wonderful are the Leelas of Baba. And now let's move towards the next point, that is next story, Amra Leela, that is Mango Miracle. Once a parcel of rupees 300 good mangoes was received at Shirdi. It was sent from Goa by one Mamlatdar named Rale to Sai Baba in the name of Shama. When it was opened, all the mangoes were found to be in a good condition. They were given in Shama jars and only 4 were retained and placed in the kolamba, that is pot, by Baba. He said, "These 4 fruits are for Damu Anna, let them lie there." This Damu Anna had 3 wives. According to this statement mentioned above, he had not 3 but 2 wives. He had no issue. He consulted many astrologers and himself studied astrology to some extent and found that as there was a Papi, inauspicious planet in his horoscope, there was no prospect of any issue to him in this life. But he had a great faith in Baba. When he went to Shirdi 2 hours after the receipt of the mango parcel for worshipping Baba, he said, "Though other people are looking for the mangoes, they are Damya's. He whose they are should eat and die." Damu Anna, on hearing these words, was first shocked, but the Mahalsapati, explaining to him that death meant the death of the ego and to have it at Baba's feet was a blessing. Damu Anna said that he could accept the fruit and eat them. But Baba said to him, "Do not eat yourself, but give them to your younger wife. This Amra Leela will give her 4 sons and 4 daughters." This was done, and in due course it was found Baba's words turned out true and not those of the astrologers. Baba's speech established its efficacy or greatness while he was living in the flesh, but he did the same even after his passing away. Baba said, "Believe me, though I pass away, my bones in my tomb would be speaking, moving, and communicating with those who would surrender themselves wholeheartedly to me. Do not be anxious that I would be absent from you. You will hear my bones speaking and discussing your welfare, but remember me always, believe in me, heart and soul, and then you will be most benefited." And now here is the prayer. Hemadpant closes this chapter with a prayer. O Sai Sadguru, with the wish fulfilling trees of Bhaktas, we pray, let us never forget and lose sight of your feet. We have been troubled with the ins and outs, that is birth and deaths in this sansar. Now free us from this cycle of births and deaths. Restrain us from the outgoing of our senses to their object and introvert us and bring us face to face with the Atma, that is self. As long as this outgoing tendency of the senses and the mind is not checked, there is no prospect of self-realization. Neither son nor wife nor friend will be of any use in the end. This is only you who will give us salvation and bliss. Destroy completely our tendency for discussion and other evil matters. Let our tongue get a passion of chanting your name. Drive our thoughts and make us forget our bodies and do away with our egoism. Make us ever remember your name and forget all other things. Remove the restlessness of our mind and make it steady and calm. If you just claps us, the darkness of night of our ignorance will vanish and we will live happily in your light. That you made us drink the nectar of your Leela and awakened us from our slumber is due to your grace and our store of merits in past births. So, such a beautiful was a prayer. And now here is one note written in the connection. The following extract from Damu Anna's statement mentioned above is worth perusal. Once, when I sat at his feet along with many others, I had 2 questions in my mind, and he gave answers to both. First, there are so many crowding to Sai Baba. Do they all get benefit from him? To this, he replied orally, "Look at the mango tree in blossom. If all the flowers become fruit, what a splendid crop it would be. But do they? Most fall off, that is, either as a flower or as unripe fruits, by wind, etc. Very few remains. The second question was about myself. If Baba were to pass away, how hopelessly adrift I would be, and how am I to fare then? To this, Baba answered that he would be with me whenever and wherever I thought of him. That promise he had kept up before 1918 and has been keeping up after 1980. He is still with me. He is still guiding me. This was about 1910, when brother separated from me and my sister died, and there was a theft and police inquiry. All these incidents made me very disturbed. When my sister died, my mind was much upset. I did not care for life and enjoyments. When I went to Baba, he pacified me with his upadesh and made me eat a feast of Puran Poli at Appa Kulkarni's house. There was a theft in my house. A 30-year-old friend of mine stole my wife's jewel box, including her auspicious nut, that is, nose ring. I wept before Baba's photo. The next day, that man returned the jewel box and asked for the pardon. And by this way, we have ended up with this chapter. Both to Sri Sai and peace to be all. Now it's time to turn towards chapter number 26. In this chapter, the stories are about first Bhakta Panta, second Harishchandra Pitale, and third Gopal Ambadekar. Preliminary. All the things that we see in the universe are nothing but a play of Maya, the creative power of the Lord. These things do not really exist. What really exists is the Absolute. Just as we mistake a rope or a garland for a serpent, that is snake, on account of darkness, we always see the phenomena, that is, things, as they outwardly appear and do not noumenon which underlines all the visible things. It is only the Sadguru who opens the eyes of our understanding and enables us to see things in their true light and not as they appear. Let us therefore worship the Sadguru and pray to him to give us the true vision, which is nothing but God vision. So let's see the inner worship. Hemad Pant has given us a novel form of worship. Let us, he says, use water in the form of tears of joy to wash the Sadguru's feet. Let us besmear his body with sandal paste of pure love. Let us cover his body with the cloth of truth faith. Let us offer 8 lotus in the form of our 8 sattvic emotions and fruit in the form of our concentrated mind. Let us apply to his head the bukka, that is black powder, in the form of devotion, and tie the waistband of bhakti and place our head at his feet. After decorating the Sadguru with all ornamentation this way, let us offer ourselves to him and wave chamber of devotion to ward off heat. After such blissful worship, let us pray thus: turn our mind inward, give us discrimination between the unreal and the real, and non-attachment for all worldly things, and thus enable us to get self-realization. We surrender ourselves, body and soul, that is body consciousness and ego, to you. Make our eyes yours so that we should never feel pleasure and pain. Control our body and mind as you wish. Let our mind rest at your feet. And now, let us turn to the stories of this chapter. First story, that is of Bhakta Panta. Once, it so happened that a devotee by name Panta, a disciple of another guru, had the good fortune of visiting Shirdi. He had no mind to go to Shirdi, but man proposes one way and God disposes the other. He was travelling in a BB and CI railway train, where he met many friends bound for Shirdi. They all asked him to accompany them, and he could not say no. They alighted at Mumbai while Panta got down at Virar. There he took the permission of his guru for the Shirdi trip, and after arranging for the expenses, left with the party for Shirdi. They all reached the place in the morning and went to the masjid at about 11 a.m. On seeing the concourse of the devotees assembled for Baba's worship, they were all pleased, but Panta suddenly got a fit and fell senseless. They were all frightened. Still, they tried their best to revive his sense. With Baba's grace, after sprinkling water over his head, he regained his consciousness and sat upright as if he was just awakened from sleep. The omniscient Baba, knowing that he was a disciple of another Guru, assured him and confirmed him his faith in his own Guru by addressing him as follows: Come what may, leave not, but stick to your own bolster, that is, Guru, and ever remain steady with him. Panta at once knew the significance of this remark, and thus he was reminded of his Guru. This kindness of Baba he never forgot in his life. And now let's see the next story, that is of Harishchandra Pitale. There was a gentleman by name Harishchandra Pitale in Mumbai. He had a son who suffered from epilepsy. He tried many allopathic and Ayurvedic physicians, but there was no cure. There remained only one way of remedy, that is, resorting to the sense. This has been stated in chapter 15 that Das Ganu, by his inimitable and splendid kirtans, spread the fame of Sai Baba in the Mumbai Presidency. Mr. Pitale heard some of these kirtans in 1910 and learned from the kirtans and other that Baba, with his touch and merry glance, cured many incurable diseases. Then a desire arose in his mind to see Sai Baba. Making all preparations and taking offerings and fruit basket, Mr. Pitale came to Shirdi with wife and children. He then went to masjid with them, prostrated before Baba, and placed his sick son at Baba's feet. No sooner did Baba see the child than an untoward thing happened. The son immediately revolved his eyes and fell down senseless. His mouth began to throw foam and his whole body began to perspire profusely, and it seemed as if he was breathing his last. Seeing this, the parents became very nervous and upset. The boy used to get such fits very often, but these fits seemed to persist long. Tears began to flow ceaselessly from the mother's eyes, and she began to wail that her condition was like that of a person who, being afraid of the robbers, ran into a house which collapsed on him, or like a cow fearing a tiger ran into the hands of a butcher, or like a traveler who, being tormented by the heat of the sun, went to take refuge under a tree which fell upon him, or like a devout person going for worship into a temple which collapsed upon him. Baba comforted her, saying, Do not wail like this. Wait a bit. Have patience. Take the boy to your lodging. He will come to his sense within an half hour. They did as directed by Baba and found that his words came true. As soon as he was taken into the Vada, the boy recovered, and all the Pitale family and others were very happy, and all their doubt disappeared. Then Mr. Pitale went with his wife to see Baba and prostrated himself before him very humbly and respectfully, and sat shampooing his legs and mentally thanking Baba for his kind help. Baba then smilingly said, Have not all your thoughts, doubts and apprehensions calmed down now? Hari, that is Lord, will protect him who has got faith and patience. Mr. Pitale was a rich and well-to-do gentleman. He distributed sweetmeats on a large scale and offered to Baba excellent fruits and pan, that is bitter leaves. Mrs. Pitale was a very pious lady, simple, loving and faithful. She used to sit near the post, gazing at Baba with tears of joy flowing down from her eyes. Seeing her immaculate and loving nature, Baba was much pleased with her. Like God, saints are always dependent on their devotees who surrender and worship them with their heart and soul. After passing some happy days in Baba's company, the Pitale family came to the masjid to take Baba's leave to depart. Baba gave them modi and blessings and called Mr. Pitale close to him and said, Bapu, I had given you ₹2 before, now I give you ₹3. Keep this in your shrine for worship and you will be benefited. Mr. Pitale accepted this as a prasad, prostrated himself again before Baba and prayed for his blessings. A thought arose in his mind that, as this was his first visit to Shirdi, he could not understand what Baba meant when he said that he had given ₹2 previously. He was curious to have this mystery solved, but Baba kept silent. When Mr. Pitale returned to Mumbai, he narrated to his old mother all that had happened at Shirdi and the mystery about Baba's giving him ₹2 earlier. The mother also did not understand the mystery, but thinking seriously about this, she was reminded of an old incident which solved the mystery. She said to her son, "As you now went to Sai Baba with your son, so had your father done when he took you to Akkalkot for the darshan of the Maharaj there many years ago. That Maharaj was also a Siddha, perfect yogi, omniscient and gracious. Your father was devout and his worship was accepted. He then gave your father rupees too for being kept in the shrine and worshipped. Your father worshipped them till his death, but thereafter the worship was neglected and the rupees were lost. After some years, the memory of these 2 rupees also disappeared, and now, as you are very fortunate, the Akkalkot Maharaj has appeared to you in the form of Sai Baba, just to remind you of your duties and worship to ward off all dangers. Now beware henceforth. Leave all doubts and bad thoughts, follow your ancestor and go on worshipping the family gods and the rupees, and take pride in the blessings of the saints. Sai Samartha has kindly revived the spirit of bhakti in you. Cultivate it to your benefits." Hearing the remarks of the mother, Mr. Pitale was very much delighted. He came to know and was convinced about all pervasiveness of Baba and the significance of his darshan. Then now onwards he became very careful about his conduct. So such was the above story, and now let's see the next story, that is of Mr. Ambadekar. Mr. Gopal Narayan Ambadekar of Pune was a devotee of Baba. He served for 10 years in the Abkari department in the Thana district and in Jawhar state, from where he had to retire. He tried to get some other job, but he did not succeed. He was overtaken by other calamities and his condition grew from bad to worse. He passed 7 years in this condition, visiting Shirdi every year and placing his grievance before Baba. In 1916, his plight became worse and he decided to commit suicide in Shirdi. So he came there with his wife and stayed for 2 months. One night, while sitting in a bullock cart in front of Dikshitwada, he resolved to end his life by throwing himself in a well close by. But Baba wished to do something else. A few pegs from his place there was a hotel, and its proprietor, Mr. Sagun, a devotee of Baba, came out and accosted him thus, "Did you ever read Akkalkot Maharaj's life?" Ambadekar took this book from Sagun and began to read it. Casually, or we may say providentially, he came across a story which was to his effect. During the lifetime of Akkalkot Maharaj, a certain devotee suffered very much from an incurable disease, and when he could no longer endure the agony and pain, he became desperate, and in order to end his miseries, threw himself one night into a well. Immediately, the Maharaj came there and took him out with his own hands and advised him thus. So guys, this is the very important thing which you're gonna listen. So please do listen carefully. You must bear the fruit, good or bad, of your past actions. If it is incomplete, suicide won't help you. You have to take another birth and suffer again. So instead of killing yourself, why not suffer for some time and finish up the fruit of your past deeds and be done with it once and for all? Reading this appropriate and timely story, Ambadekar was much surprised and moved. Had he not got Baba's hint through the story, he would have been no more. On seeing Baba's all-pervasiveness and benevolence, his faith in him was confirmed and he became a staunch devotee. His father was a devotee of Akkalkot Maharaj, that is Swami Samartha Maharaj, and Sai Baba wanted him to walk in his father's footsteps and continue his devotion to him. He then got Sai Baba's blessing and his prospects began to improve. He studied astrology and gained proficiency in it, and thereby improved his lot. He was able to earn sufficient money and passed his later life in ease and comfort. And by this way, listening above Leelas, we have done with this chapter and got a very important message that we should never do suicide. Obstacles are for a while that we should face strongly. And both to Sri Sai, peace to be all. Let's move towards the next chapter. Here is the chapter number 27. In this chapter, we are going to see favor shown by giving Bhagavad and Vishnu Sahasranam. Second, Dikshit Vitthal Vision, and third, Gita Rahasya, and fourth, Khapar Days. This chapter describes how Sai Baba favored his devotees by granting them religious books after he had touched and consecrated them for Parayan, that is reading regularly, and certain other matters. Preliminary. When a man takes a plunge into a sea, he gets the merit of bathing in all the tirthas and sacred rivers. Similarly, when man takes refuge at the feet of the Sadguru, he gets the merits of bowing to the Trinity, that is Brahma, Vishnu, and Mahesh, and also Parabrahma. Victory be unto Sri Sai, the wish-fulfilling tree and the ocean of knowledge who gives us self-realization. O Sai, create in us reverence for your stories. Let the readers and audience devour them with the same relish with which the chatak bird drinks the water from the clouds and becomes happy. While listening to your stories, let them and their families get all the true and pure emotions, that is, let their bodies perspire, let their eyes be full of tears, let their breath be steady, let their minds be composed, let their hair stand on end, let them cry, sob, and quiver, let their hostilities vanish. When these things happen, that is a sign of the grace of the Guru dawning upon them. When these emotions grow in you, the Guru is most pleased and will certainly lead you on the path of self-realization. The best way, therefore, to get free from the shackles of Maya is our complete and wholehearted surrender to Baba. The Vedas cannot take you across the ocean of Maya. It is only the Sadguru who can do so and make you see the God in all creatures. And now let's see granting consecrated book. The various methods of imparting instructions followed by Baba have already been noticed in the previous chapters. In this, we shall deal with one aspect of it. It was the habit of some devotees to take to Baba some religious book of which they wanted to make a special study and to receive the same back from him after they were touched and consecrated by him. While reading such books daily, they felt that Baba was with them. Once, Kaka Mahajani came to Shirdi with a copy of Eknathi Bhagavad. Shama took this book to read in the masjid. There Baba took it from him, touched it, and turning some pages here and there, gave it back to Shama and asked him to keep it with him. When Shama said that it belonged to Kaka and had to be returned to him, "No, no," Baba replied. "As I have given it to you, you better keep it. It will be of use to you." In this way, many books were entrusted to Shama. Kaka Mahajani after a few days came again with another copy of the same Bhagavad and gave it in Baba's hand. Then Baba gave it back as prasad and asked him to preserve it well and assured him that it would stand him in good stead. Kaka accepted it with reverence. And now let's see the next story, that is of Shama and Vishnu Sahasranam. Shama was a very intimate devotee of Baba and Baba wanted to favor him in a particular way by giving him a copy of Vishnu Sahasranam as prasad. This was done in the following way. Once a Ramdasi, the follower of Saint Ramdas, came to Shirdi and stayed there for some time. The routine he followed daily was as follows. He got up early in the morning, washed his face, bathed, and then after wearing saffron-colored clothes and besmearing himself with sacred ashes, read Vishnu Sahasranam. That is, a book giving 1,000 names in a praise of Vishnu and held second in importance to Bhagavad Gita. And Adhyatma Ramayan, that is, esoteric version of Rama's story, with faith. He read these books very often. After some days, Baba thought of favoring and initiating Shama with Vishnu Sahasranam. He therefore called the Ramdasi to him and said to him that he was suffering from intense stomach pain and unless he took Senapods, that is Sonmukhi, a mild purgative drug, the pain would not stop. so he should please to go to the bazaar, that is market, and bring the drugs. The Ramdasi closed his book and went to the bazaar. Then Baba came from his seat to Ramdasi' place of reading and took out the copy of Vishnu Sahasranam, and after coming back to his seat said to Shama, Shama, this book is very valuable and efficacious, so I present it to you. You read it. Once I suffered intensely and my heart began to palpitate and my life was in danger. At that critical moment, I hugged this book to my heart, and then, Shama, what a relief it gave me. I thought that Allah Himself came down and saved me. So I give this to you. Read this slowly, little by little. Read daily one name, at least it will give you good. Shama replied that he did not want it, and that the owner of it, the Ramdasi, who was a bad-tempered, obstinate and irritable fellow, would certainly pick up a quarrel with him. Besides, being a rustic himself, he could not read distinctly the Sanskrit, that is Devanagari script, text of the book. Shama thought that Baba wanted to set him up against the Ramdasi by his act of his, but he had no idea what Baba felt for him. Baba must have thought to tie his necklace of Vishnu Sahasranam round the neck of Shama, as he was an intimate devotee though a rustic, and thus save him from the miseries of worldly existence. The efficacy of God's name is well known. It saves us from all the sins, that is pap and bad tendencies, frees us from the cycle of births and deaths. There is no easier sadhana than this. This is the best purifier of our mind. It requires no paraphernalia and no restrictions. It is so easy and so effective. This sadhana Baba wanted Shama to practice, though he did not crave for it. So Baba forced this on him. It is also reported that long ago, Eknath Maharaj similarly forced this Vishnu Sahasranam on a poor Brahmin neighbor and thus saved him. The reading and study of this Vishnu Sahasranam is a broad open way of purifying the mind, and hence Baba thrust this on his devotee, that is Shama. The Ramdasi returned soon with the Senapods. Anna Chinsanikar, who was then present and wanted to play the part of Narad, the celestial rishi who was well known for setting up confrontations between gods and demons and vice versa, informed him of what had happened. The Ramdasi at once flared up. He came down at once on Shama's with a full fury. He said that it was Shama who said Baba to send him away under the pretext of stomach ache for bringing the medicine, and thus took away the book. He began to scold and abuse Shama and remarked that if the book was not returned, he would dash his head. Shama calmly remonstrated with him, but in vain. Then Baba spoke kindly to him as follows. O Ramdasi, what is the matter with you? Why are you so turbulent? Is not Shama our boy? Why do you scold him unnecessarily? How is that you are so quarrelsome? Can you not speak soft and tender words? You read these sacred books daily and still your mind is agitated and your passion uncontrolled. What sort of Ramdasi are you? You ought to be indifferent to all things. Is it not strange that you should possess this book so strongly? A true Ramdasi should have no mamta, that is attachment, but have samta, that is equality towards all. You are now quarrelling with Shama for a merry book? Go, take your seat. Books can be had in a plenty with money, but not men. Think well and be considerate. What warmth is your book? Shama had no concern with it. I took it up myself and gave it to him. You know it by heart. I thought Shama might read it and benefit thereby, and so I gave it to him. How sweet were these words of Baba, soft, tender and nectar-like. Their effect was wonderful. The Ramdasi calmed down and said to Shama that he would take the Pancharatna Gita in return. Shama was much pleased and said, Why one? I shall give 10 copies in return. So the matter was ultimately settled. The question for consideration is, why should the Ramdasi press for Pancharatna Gita, a book for which he never cared to know, and why should he, who daily read religious book in the masjid in front of Baba, quarrel with Shama before him? We do not know how to apportion the blame and whom to blame. We only say that had this incident not happened, the importance of the subject, the efficacy of God's name, and the significance of Vishnu Sahasranam would not have been brought home to Shama. So we see that Baba's method of teaching and initiating was unique. In this case, Shama did gradually study the book and master its contents to such an extent that he was able to explain it to Professor G.G. Narke, MA of the College of Engineering, Pune, the son-in-law of Shriman Bhuti and a devotee of Baba. And now let's see the next story, that is of Vitthal Vision. One day while Kakasaheb Dikshit was in a meditation after his morning bath in his vada at Shirdi, he saw a vision of Vitthal. When he went to see Baba afterwards, Baba asked him, "Did Vitthal Patil come? Did you not see him? He is very elusive. Hold him fast, otherwise he will give you the slip and run away." Then at noon, a certain hawker came there with 20 or 25 pictures of Vitthal of Pandharpur for sale. Mr. Dikshit was surprised to see that the form of Vitthal he saw in his meditation exactly tallied with all that the pictures. And he was also reminded of Baba's words. He therefore bought one picture most willingly and kept it in his shrine for worship. And now let's see the Gita's Rahasya. Baba always loved those who studied Brahma Vidya, that is metaphysics, and encouraged them. To give an instance, once Bapu Sahib Jog received a post parcel. It contained a copy of Gita Rahasya by Lokmanya Tilak. Taking it under his armpit, he came to masjid and prostrated before Baba. When the parcel fell at Baba's feet, Baba inquired what it was. It was opened then and there, and the book was placed in Baba's hand. He turned some pages here and there for few minutes and took out a rupee from his pocket, placed it on the book and handed the same with the rupee to Jog and said to him, "Read this completely and you will be benefited." And now let's see the last point of this chapter, that is Mr. and Mrs. Khaparde. Let us close this chapter with a description of the Khapardes. Once Dada Saheb Khaparde came with his family and lived in Shirdi for some months. Dada Saheb was not an ordinary man. He was the affluent and the most famous advocate of Amravati and was a member of Council of State, Delhi. He was intelligent and very good speaker. Still, he dared not open his mouth before Baba. Most devotees spoke and argued with Baba off and on, but only three, that is, Khaparde, Nolkar and Bhuti, kept always silent. They were meek, modest, humble and good-natured. Dada Saheb, who was able to expound Panchadashi, that is well-known Sanskrit treatise on the Advait philosophy by the famous Vidyaranya, to others uttered no word when he came to the masjid before Baba. A man, however learned he may be even in Vedas, fades away before one who has realized Brahma and become one with it. Learning cannot stand before self-realization. Dada Saheb stayed for 4 months, but Mrs. Khaparde stayed for 7. Both were highly pleased with their Shirdi stay. Mrs. Khaparde was faithful and devout and loved Baba deeply. Every noon she brought Naivedya herself to the masjid, and after it was accepted by Baba, she used to return and take her meals. On seeing her steady and firm devotion, Baba wanted to exhibit it to others. One noon she brought a dish containing sanza, that is wheat pudding, puris, rice, soup and kheer, that is sweet rice, and other sundry articles to the masjid. Baba, who usually waited for hours, got up at once, went up to his seat and removing the cover from the dish, began to partake of the things zealously. Shama then asked him, "Why this partiality? At times you throw away dishes of others and do not care to look at them, but this appeals to you earnestly. Why is the dish brought by this lady so sweet? This intrigues us." Baba then explained, This food is really extraordinary. In former birth, this lady was a merchant, fat cow yielding much milk. Then she disappeared and took birth in a gardener's family, then in the Kshatriya's family and married a merchant. Then she was born in a Brahman family. I saw her after a very long time. Let me take some sweet morsels of love from her dish. After saying this, Baba did full justice to her dish, washed his mouth and hands, belched out as he was fully satisfied, and resumed his seat. Then she bowed down and began to shampoo Baba's legs, and he began to talk with her and knead her arms, which were shampooing his legs. On seeing this reciprocal service, Shama began to joke and said, "It is going on well. It is a wonderful sight to see God and his bhakta serving each other." After being pleased with her sincere service, Baba asked her in low and fascinating tone to chant Rajaram, Rajaram, then and always, and said, "If you do this, your life object will be achieved, your mind will attain peace, and you will be immensely benefited." To persons unfamiliar with spiritual matters, this might appear as a polite gesture, but really it was not so. It was a case of what is technically called, that is Shaktipat, that is, transfers of power from the Guru to the disciple. How effective were Baba's words! In an instant they pierced her heart and remained there. This case illustrates the nature of the relations that should subsist between the Guru and the disciple. Both should love and serve each other as one. There is no distinction nor any difference between them. Both are one, and one cannot live without the other. The disciple placing his head at the Guru's feet is a gross or outward vision. Really and internally they are both one and the same. Those who see any difference between them are yet unripe and not perfect. And by this way, we are done with this chapter. Both to Sri Sai, peace to be all. Here is chapter number 28, that is Sparrows Drawn to Shirdi. First point in this chapter is about Lakshmi Chand. Second, Burhanpur lady. And third, Megha. Preliminary. Sai is not finite or limited. He dwells in all beings, from ants and insects to the god Brahma. He pervades all. Sai was well versed in the knowledge of the Vedas as well as in the science of self-realization. As he was proficient in both these, he was well fitted to be Sadguru. Anyone, though learned but not able to awaken the disciples and establish them self-realization, does not deserve to be called a Sadguru. Generally, the worldly parent gives birth to the body, but death invariably follows life. But Sadguru does not away with both life and death, and so he is more kind and merciful than anybody. Sai Baba often said that, let his man, that is devotee, be at any distance, 1,000 kos away from him. He will be drawn to Shirdi like a sparrow with a thread tied to its feet. This chapter describes the story of 3 such sparrows. First point, that is of Lala Lakshmi Chand. This gentleman was first serving in the Sri Venkateshwar Press in Mumbai, then in the railway department, and afterwards in the firm of Messrs. Raleigh Brothers and Co. as a munshi, that is clerk. He came in Baba's contact in 1910. 1 or 2 months before Christmas, he saw in his dream at Santa Cruz, that is a suburb of Mumbai, an old man with a beard standing and surrounded by his bhaktas. A few days later, he went to the house of his friend, that is Mr. Dattatreya Manjunath Bijur, to hear the kirtan by Dasganu. It was always the practice of Dasganu to keep Baba's picture in front of the audience while doing the kirtan. Lakshmi Chand was surprised to see that the features of the old man he saw in his dreams tallied exactly with those in the picture, and thus he came to the conclusion that the old man he saw in his dream was Sai Baba himself. The sight of this picture, Dasganu Kirtans, and the life of the Saint Tukaram on which Dasganu discoursed, all these things made a deep impression on his mind, and he decided to go to Shirdi. It is always the experience of the bhaktas that God always helps them in their search for Sadguru and other spiritual endeavors. that every night a friend named Shankar Rao knocked at his door and asked him whether he would accompany him to Shirdi. His joy knew no bounds, and he at once decided to go to Shirdi. He borrowed rupees 15 from his cousin and after making due preparations left for Shirdi. In the train, he and his friend Shankar Rao did some bhajan, that is, sang religious songs, and inquired about Sai Baba with some fellow passengers, four Mohammedans who were returning to their place near Shirdi. They told them that Sai Baba was a great saint living in Shirdi for many years. When they reached Kopargaon, he wanted to buy some good gavas as offering to Baba, but he was so wrapped in the scenery and sight there that he forgot to purchase them. When they were nearing Shirdi, he was reminded of the Goa. Just then he saw an old woman with the Goa basket on her head running after the tanga. The tanga was stopped and he gladly purchased some fruits when the woman said, "Take all the rest and offer them on my behalf to Baba." The fact that is that he had intended to purchase Goa but had forgotten to do so. The old woman encounter and her devotion to Baba, all these were a pleasant surprise to both the friends, and Lakshmi Chand thought in his mind that the old woman might be some relation of the old man he saw in his dream. Then they drove on and came near Shirdi, and on seeing flags on the masjid, they saluted them. With puja materials in hand, they went to masjid and worshipped Baba with due ritual. Lakshmi Chand was much moved and was extremely happy to see Baba. He wrapped himself around with Baba's feet as a bee with a sweet smelling lotus. Then Baba spoke as follows. Cunning fellow, he does bhajan on the way and inquires from others. Why ask others? Everything we should see with our own eyes. Where is the necessity to question others? Just think for yourself whether your dream is true or not. Where was the necessity of the darshan by taking a loan from a Marwadi? Is the heart desire now satisfied? Hearing these words, Lakshmi Chand was wonderstruck at Baba's omniscience. He was at a loss to know how Baba came to know about all the things that had happened en route from his house to Shirdi. The chief thing to note in this respect is that Baba never lacked people to borrow or take a loan for his darshan or celebrating any holiday or making any pilgrimage. And now let's see the first sub-point of this story, that is Sanza. At noon, when Lakshmi Chand was sitting for meals, he got some sanza, that is wheat pudding, from a devotee as prasad. He was pleased to have it. Next day, also he expected it but got nothing, so he was anxious to get it again. This on the third day at the noon aarti time, Bapu Sahib Jog asked Baba what naivedya he should bring. Baba told him to bring sanza. Then the bhaktas brought two big potfuls of sanza. Lakshmi Chand was very hungry and there was some pain in his back. Then Baba said to him, "It is good that you are hungry. Take sanza and some medicine for the pain in the back." He was again wonderstruck to see the Babas again read his mind and spoke out what was passing therein. How omniscient was he! And now second sub-point, that is evil eye. During the visit, he, that is Lakshmi Chand, also witnessed one night the procession of the Chaudi. Baba then suffered much from cough. He thought that the suffering of Baba might be due to somebody's evil eye. Next morning, when he went to the masjid, Baba spoke to Shamaz as follows. "I suffered last night from cough. Is it due to some evil eye? I think that somebody's evil eye has worked on me and so I am suffering." In this case, Baba spoke out what was going on in mind of Lakshmi Chand. On seeing these proofs of Baba omniscience and kindness to his bhaktas, he fell prostrate at Baba's feet and said, "I am much blessed with your darshan. Ever be kind and merciful to me and protect me always. There is no other God to me in this world except you. Let my mind be ever wrapped in your bhajan and feed. Let your grace protect me from the miseries of the world and let me ever chant your name and be happy." After getting Baba's uday and blessing, he returned home with his friend, much pleased and contented, and was singing Baba's glory on the way. He remained a staunch devotee of Baba then onward and always set garlands of flowers, camphor, and dakshina with any person of his acquaintance bound for Shirdi. And now let's see the second story, that is Burhanpur lady. Now let us turn to another sparrow, that is devotee. One lady in Burhanpur saw in her dream Sai Baba coming to her door and begging khichdi for his meals. On waking up, she saw nobody at her door. However, she was pleased with the vision and told it to all, including her husband. He was employed in the postal department, and when he was transferred to Akola, both husband and wife, who were devout persons, decided to go to Shirdi. Then on a suitable day, they left for Shirdi, and after visiting Gomati Tirtha on the way, reached Shirdi and stayed there for 2 months. Every day they went to the masjid, worshipped Baba, and passed their time happily. The couple came to Shirdi to offer khichdi as Naivedya, but for the first 14 days, somehow or other, it could not be offered. The lady did not like this delay or tardiness. On the 15th day, she came at noon to the masjid with her khichdi. There she found that Baba and others were already sitting for meals and that the curtain was down. Nobody dared enter in when the curtain was down, but the lady could not wait. She lifted up the curtain and entered. Strange to say that Baba seemed that day hungry for khichdi and wanted that thing first. And when the lady came in with the dish, Baba was delighted and began to eat morsel after morsel of khichdi. On seeing the earnestness of Baba in this respect, everybody was wonderstruck, and those who heard the story of khichdi were convinced about his extraordinary love for his devotees. And now let's move towards the next point, that is Megha. Now let us go to third sparrow, that is Megha of Viramgaon was a simple and illiterate Brahmin cook of Rao Bahadur, that is H.V. Sathe. He was a devotee of Shiva and always chanted the 5-syllabled mantra, Namah Shivaya. He did not know the Sandhya nor its chief mantra, the Gayatri. Rao Bahadur Sathe was interested in him, taught him the Sandhya and the Gayatri. Sathe told him that Sai Baba of Shirdi was the embodied form of God Shiva and made him start for Shirdi. At Bharuch railway station, he learned that Sai Baba was a Muslim, and his simple and orthodox mind was much perturbed at the prospect of bowing down to a Muslim, and he prayed to his master not to send him there. His master, however, insisted on his going there and gave him a letter of introduction to his father-in-law, Ganesh Damodar, Urf Dada Kelkar, at Shirdi to introduce him to Sai Baba. When he reached Shirdi and went to masjid, Baba was very indignant and would not allow him to enter. "Kick out the rascal," roared Baba, and then said to Megha, "You are a high caste of Brahmin and I am a low Muslim. You will lose your caste by coming here. Just get away." On hearing these words, Megha began to tremble. He was wondering as to how Baba had come to know about what was passing in his mind. He stayed there for some days, serving Baba in his own way, but was not convinced. Then he went home and then to Trambak, that is Nasik district, and stayed there for a year and a half. Then again he returned to Shirdi. This time, at the intercession of Dada Kelkar, he was allowed to enter the masjid and stay in Shirdi. Sai Baba's help to Megha was not through any oral instruction. He worked upon Megha internally, that is mentally, with the result that he was considerably changed and benefited. Then Megha began to look upon Sai Baba as an incarnation of Shiva. In order to worship Shiva, bell leaves are required, and Megha used to go miles and miles every day to bring them and worship his Shiva, that is Sai Baba. His practice was to worship all the deities in the village and then come to masjid, and after saluting Baba's gadi, that is asan, he worshipped Baba, and after doing some service, that is shampooing his legs, drank the washings, that is tirtha, of Baba's feet. Once it is so happened that he came to masjid without worshipping Khandoba, as the door of the temple was closed. Baba did not accept his worship and sent him back again, saying that the door was open then. Megha went, found the door open, worshipped the deity, and then returned to Baba as usual. And now let's see the next point in this chapter, that is Gange's bath. On one Makar Sankranti day, Megha wanted to besmear the body of Baba with sandal paste and bath him with Gange's water. Baba was first unwilling to undergo this, but as his repeated request, he consisted. Megha had to traverse a distance of 8 kos, that is going and returning, to bring the sacred water from the Godavari river. He brought the water, made all preparations for the bath at noon, and asked Baba to get ready for the same. Then Baba again asked him to spread for his bath, saying that as a fakir he had nothing to do with Gange's water, but Megha did not listen to him. He knew that Shiva is pleased with Abhishek, that is sacred bath, on that auspicious day. Baba then consented, came down and sat on a wooden board, and projecting his head said, "O Megha, do at least this favor. Head is the most important organ of the body, so pour the water over that only. It is equivalent to the whole bath." "All right," said Megha, and lifting the water pot up began to pour it on the head, but in doing this he was so much overwhelmed with love that he cried out, "Har Har Gange," and emptied the pot on the whole body. He kept the pot aside and began to look at Baba, but to his surprise and amazement he found that only Baba's head was drenched while the body quite dry. Next point of this story is Tridanta and Pindi. Megha worshipped Baba at two places. In the masjid he worshipped Baba in person, and in the Wada, Baba's big picture given by Nana Sahib Chandorkar. This he did for 12 months. Then, in order to appreciate his devotion and confirm his faith, Baba gave him a vision. One morning, when Megha was still lying down on his bed with eyes closed but internally awake, he saw clearly Baba's form. Baba, knowing him to be awake, threw Akshata and said, "Megha, draw a Tridanta," and disappeared. Hearing Baba's words, he eagerly opened his eyes, saw no Baba there but only the rice grains spread here and there. He then went to Baba, told him about the vision, and asked permission to draw Tridanta. Baba said, "Did you not hear my words asking you to draw Tridanta? It was no vision but direct order. My words are always pregnant with meaning and never hollow." Megha said, "I thought you woke me up, but all the doors were closed, so I doubtfully and thought it to be a vision." Baba rejoined, "I required no door to enter. I have no form. I always live everywhere. As a wire puller, I carry on all the actions of the man who trusts me and merges in me." Megha returned to the Wada and drew a red Tridanta on the wall near Baba's picture. Next day, a Ramdasi Bhakta came from Pune, saluted Baba and offered him Pinda. That is a phallic image of Shiva. At this time, Megha also turned up there. Baba said to him, "See, Shankar has come. Protect him now." Megha was pleasantly surprised to see Pindi. Also in the Wada, Kaka Sahib Dikshit was standing with a towel on his head after having taken his bath, and was remembering Sai when he saw a Pindi in his mental vision. While he was wondering about this, Megha came and showed him the Pindi presented to him by Baba. Dikshit was happy to know that the Pindi exactly tallied with the one he saw a few minutes before in his vision. In a few days after the drawing of the Tridanta was complete, Baba installed the Pindi near the big picture which Megha was worshipping. The worship of Shiva was dear to Megha, and by the drawing of Tridanta and the installation of the Pinda, Baba confirmed his faith therein. After continuous service of Baba for many years, doing regular worship and arti every noon and evening, Megha passed away in 1912. Then Baba passed his hands over his mortal remains and said, "This was a true devotee of mine." Baba also ordered that his own expenses the funeral dinner should be given to the Brahmins, and this order was carried out by Kaka Sahib Dikshit. And by this way we have ended up with this chapter.